Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves, narrated Amr b. Shu'aib, on his father's authority, told that his grandfather reported the Prophet said, "A slave who has entered into an agreement to purchase his freedom is a slave as long as a dirham of the agreed price remains to be paid." Sunan Abi Dawud 3926 Reference 31 Hadith 1. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves, narrated Amr b. Shu'aib, on his father's authority, told that his grandfather reported the Prophet said, "If any slave entered into an agreement to buy his freedom for 100 uqiyas and he pays them all but 10, he remains a slave, until he pays the remaining 10. And if a slave entered into an agreement to purchase his freedom for 100 dinars, and he pays them all but 10 dinars, he remains a slave, until he pays the remaining 10. Abu Dawud said, "This narrator Abbas al-Jariri is not the same person." They said, "It is misunderstanding. He is some other narrator." Sunan Abi Dawud 3927 Reference 31 Hadith 2. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves, narrated Salama, Ummul Mu'minin. The Messenger of Allah said to us, "If one of you has a slave, and he enters into an agreement to purchase his freedom, and can pay the full price, she must veil herself from him." Sunan Abi Dawud 3928 Reference 31 Hadith 3. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Urwa, quoting from Aisha, said that Barira came to her seeking her help to purchase her freedom, and she did not pay anything for her freedom. Aisha said to her, "Return to your people. If you like that, I make payment for the purchase of your freedom on your behalf, and I shall have the right to inherit from you. I shall do so." Barira mentioned it to her people, but they refused and said, "If she wants to purchase your freedom for reward from Allah, she may do so, but the right to inherit from her shall be ours." She mentioned it to the Messenger of Allah. The Messenger of Allah said, "Purchase her freedom, and set her free, for the right of inheritance belongs only to the one who set a person free." The Messenger of Allah then stood up and said, "If anyone makes a condition which is not in Allah's book, he has no right to it, even if he stipulates it 100 times. Allah's condition is more valid and binding." Sunan Abi Dawud 3929 Reference 31 Hadith 4. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Aisha said, "Barira came seeking my help to purchase her freedom. She said, 'I have arranged with my people to buy my freedom for 9 uqiyas, one to be paid annually. So help me.' She, Aisha, said, 'If your people are willing that I should count them, uqiyas, out to them all at one time and set you free, and that I shall have the right to inherit from you, I shall do so.' She then went to her people." The narrator then transmitted the rest of the tradition like the version of al-Zuhri. He added to the wordings of the Prophet in the last, "What is the matter with people that one of you says, 'Set free, O so and so, and the right of inheritance belongs to me'? The right of inheritance belongs to the one who has set a person free." Sunan Abi Dawud 3930 Reference 31 Hadith 5. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves, narrated Aisha, Ummul Mu'minin. Juwayriyah, daughter of al-Harith ibn al-Mustalik, fell to the lot of Thabit ibn Qais ibn Shammas, or to her cousin. She entered into an agreement to purchase her freedom. She was a very beautiful woman, most attractive to the eye. Aisha said, "She then came to the Messenger of Allah asking him for the purchase of her freedom. When she was standing at the door, I looked at her with disapproval. I realized that the Messenger of Allah would look at her in the same way that I had looked. She said, 'Messenger of Allah, I am Juwayriyah, daughter of al-Harith, and something has happened to me, which is not hidden from you. I have fallen to the lot of Thabit ibn Qais ibn Shammas, and I have entered into an agreement to purchase of my freedom. I have come to you to seek assistance for the purchase of my freedom." The Messenger of Allah said, "Are you inclined to that which is better?" She asked, "What is that, Messenger of Allah?" He replied, "I shall pay the price." Sunan Abi Dawud 3931 Reference 31 Hadith 6. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves of your freedom on your behalf, and I shall marry you. She said, "I shall do this." She, Aisha, said, "The people then heard that the Messenger of Allah had married Juwayriyah. They released the captives in their possession and set them free, and said, 'They are the relatives of the Messenger of Allah by marriage.' We did not see any woman greater than Juwayriyah who brought blessings to her people. 100 families of Banu al-Mustalik were set free on account of her." Abu Dawud said, "This evidence shows that a Muslim ruler may marry a slave woman himself." Sunan Abi Dawud 3931 Reference 31 Hadith 6. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Salama, Mu'minin. Safina said, "I was a slave of Salama, and she said, 'I shall emancipate you, but I stipulate that you must serve the Messenger of Allah as long as you live.' I said, 'Even if you do not make a stipulation, I shall not leave the Messenger of Allah.' She then emancipated me and made the stipulation with me." Sunan Abi Dawud 3932 Reference 31 Hadith 7. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Abu al-Mala, on his father's authority. This is Abu al-Walid's version. A man emancipated a share in a slave and the matter was mentioned to the Prophet. He said, "Allah has no partner." Ibn Kathir added in his version, "The Prophet allowed his emancipation." Sunan Abi Dawud 3933 Reference 31 Hadith 8. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Abu Hurairah. A man emancipated his share in a slave. The Prophet allowed his full emancipation and required him to pay the rest of his price. Sunan Abi Dawud 3934 Reference 31 Hadith 9. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves Qatada narrated with his chain of narrators. The Prophet said, "If a man emancipates a slave shared by him with another man, his emancipation rests with him, who emancipated his share." This is the version of Ibn Suwaid. Sunan Abi Dawud 3935 Reference 31 Hadith 10. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves Qatada narrated with his chain of narrators. The Prophet said, "If anyone emancipates his share in a slave, he emancipates him completely by his property if he has property." The narrator Ibn al-Mutana did not mention al-Nadir b. Anas. This is the version of Ibn Suwaid. Sunan Abi Dawud 3936 Reference 31 Hadith 11. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Abu Hurairah reported the Prophet as saying, "If anyone emancipates a share in his slave, he should completely emancipate him if he has money. But if he has none, then slave will be required to work, to pay for his freedom, but he must not be overburdened." Sunan Abi Dawud 3937 Reference 31 Hadith 12. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Abu Hurairah reported the Prophet as saying, "If anyone emancipates his share in a slave, he is to be completely emancipated by his money if he has money. But if he has no money, a fair price for the slave should be fixed, and the slave is required to work for his master according to the proportion of his price, but he must not be overburdened. Abu Dawud said, in the version of both the narrators the words are he will be required to work and must not be overburdened. This is the version of Ali. Sunan Abi Dawud 3938 reference 31 Hadith 13. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves, the tradition mentioned above by Rabi Ubadah from said B. Abu Aruba. In this version he did not mention the words the slave should be required to work. It has also been transmitted by Jarir b. Hazim and Musa b. Caliph from Qatada through the chain of Yazid b. Zurai and to the same effect. In this version they mentioned the words the slave should be required to work. Sunan Abi Dawud 3939 reference 31 Hadith 14. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Abd Allah b. Umar reported the Messenger of Allah as saying, if anyone emancipates his share in slave, a fair price for the slave should be fixed, give his partners their shares, and the slave be thus emancipated. Otherwise he is emancipated to the extent of the share which he emancipated. Sunan Abi Dawud 3940 reference 31 Hadith 15. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above has also been transmitted by Ibn Umar to the same effect through a different chain of narrators. Nafi sometimes said, he will be emancipated to the extent of the share which he emancipated, and sometimes he did not say these words. Sunan Abi Dawud 3941 reference 31 Hadith 16. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above has also been narrated by Ibn Umar from the Prophet. The narrator Ayyub said, I do not know whether the following words are part of the tradition of the Prophet or Nafi told them himself. Otherwise he will be emancipated to the extent of the first month's share. Sunan Abi Dawud 3942 reference 31 Hadith 17. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Ibn Umar reported the Messenger of Allah as saying, if anyone emancipates his share in a slave, he should emancipate him completely if he has enough money to pay the full price. But if he has none, he will be emancipated to the extent of his share. Sunan Abi Dawud 3943 reference 31 Hadith 18. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above has also been transmitted by Ibn Umar from the Prophet to the same effect as mentioned by Ibrahim b. Musa through a different chain. Sunan Abi Dawud 3944 reference 31 Hadith 19. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above has also been narrated by Ibn Umar through a different chain of transmitters to the same effect as mentioned by Malik. In this version there is no mention of the words otherwise he will be emancipated to the extent of the first month's share. His version ends and the slave be thus emancipated, to the same effect as he, Malik, mentioned. Sunan Abi Dawud 3945 reference 31 Hadith 20. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Ibn Umar reported the Prophet as saying, if a man emancipates his share in a slave, the rest will be emancipated by his money if he has enough money to pay the full price for him. Sunan Abi Dawud 3946 reference 31 Hadith 21. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Ibn Umar reported the Prophet as saying, if a man is shared by two men, and one of them emancipates his share, a price of the slave will be fixed, not more or less, and he will be emancipated by him in case he is rich. Sunan Abi Dawud 3947 reference 31 Hadith 22. Sunan Abi Dawud, The Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Ath Thalab. On the authority of his father, a man emancipated his share in a slave. The Prophet did not put the responsibility on him to emancipate the rest. Ahmad said, "The name Ibn al-Thalab is to be pronounced with a ta, and not with da." As Shuba could not pronounce ta, he said da. Sunan Abi Dawud 3948 reference 31 Hadith 23. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Samura. The Prophet said. The narrator Musa said in another place, from Samura ibn Jundub as presumed by Hamad. If anyone gets possession of a relative who is within the prohibited degrees, that person becomes free. Abu Dawud said. A similar tradition has also been transmitted by Samura from the Prophet through a different chain. Abu Dawud said, only Hamad b. Salama has transmitted this tradition and he had doubt in it. Sunan Abi Dawud 3949 reference 31 Hadith 24. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Umar ibn al-Khattab. Qatada reported Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, as saying, if anyone gets possession of a relative who is within the prohibited degrees, that person becomes free. Sunan Abi Dawud 3950 reference 31 Hadith 25. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves Qatada reported Umar b. al-Khattab, Ra, as saying, if anyone gets possession of a relative who is within the prohibited degrees, that person becomes free. Sunan Abi Dawud 3951 reference 31 Hadith 26. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves. A similar tradition has also been transmitted by Habir b. Zayd and al-Hassan through a different chain of narrators. Abu Dawud said. The narrator said retained Tay tradition more carefully than Hamad. Sunan Abi Dawud 3952 reference 31 Hadith 27. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Sulama bint Maqal al-Qasiyah. My uncle brought me to Medina in the pre-Islamic days. He sold me to al-Hubab ibn Amr, brother of Abul Yusr ibn Amr. I bore a child, Abdurrahman ibn al-Hubab, to him and he, al-Hubab, then died. Thereupon his wife said, I swear by Allah, now you will be sold, as a repayment, for his loan. So I came to the Messenger of Allah and said, Messenger of Allah, I am a woman of Banu Kharija Qais ibn Alan. My uncle had brought me to Medina in pre-Islamic days. He sold me to al-Hubab ibn Amr, brother of Abul Yusr ibn Amr. I bore Abdurrahman ibn al-Hubab to him. His wife said, I swear by Allah, you will be sold for his loan. The Messenger of Allah said, who is the guardian of al-Hubab? He was told, his brother, Abul Yusr ibn Amr. He then sent for him and said, set her free. When you hear that some slaves have been brought to me, came to me, and I shall compensate you for her. She said, they set me free, and when some slaves were brought to the Messenger Sunan Abi Dawud 3953 reference 31 Hadith 28. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves of Allah. He gave them a slave in compensation for me. Sunan Abi Dawud 3953 reference 31 Hadith 28. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves narrated Habir ibn Abdullah. We sold slave mothers during the time of the Messenger of Allah and of Abu Bakr. When Umar was in power, he forbade us and we stopped. Sunan Abi Dawud 3954 reference 31 Hadith 29. Sunan Abi Dawud. The Book of Manumission of Slaves Habir b. Abd Allah said, "A man declared that his slave would be free after his death, but he had no other property. So the Prophet ordered to sell him. He was then sold for 700 or 900 dirhams." Sunan Abi Dawud 3955 reference 31 Hadith 30. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above also has been transmitted by Habir b. Abd Allah through a different chain of narrators. This version added, "The Prophet said, 'You are more entitled to his price, and Allah has no need of it.'" Sunan Abi Dawud 3956 reference 31 Hadith 31. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Habir said, "A man of the Ansar called Abu Madkar declared that his slave called Yaqub would be free after his death, but he had no other property. So the Messenger of Allah called him and said, 'Who will buy him?' Nuaym b. Abd Allah b. al-Naham bought him for 800 dirhams. When he handed them over to him, he, Prophet, said, 'If any of you is poor, he should begin from himself. If anything is left over, give it to your family. If anything is left over, give it to your relatives. If anything is left over, when they received something, then here and here.'" Sunan Abi Dawud 3957 reference 31 Hadith 32. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Imran b. Hussein said, "A man who had no other property emancipated 6 slaves of his at the time of the death. When the Prophet was informed about it, he spoke severely of him. He then called them, divided them into 3 sections, cast lots among them, and emancipated 2 and kept 4 in slavery." Sunan Abi Dawud 3958 reference 31 Hadith 33. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above has also been transmitted by Abu Kilaba through a different chain of narrators on the authority of Imran b. Hussein to the same effect. But in this version he did not mention he spoke severely of them. Sunan Abi Dawud 3959 reference 31 Hadith 34. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above has also been transmitted by Abu Kilaba from Abu Zayd through a different chain of narrators to the same effect. A man of the Ansar. The Prophet said, "Had I been present before his burial, he would not have been buried in a Muslim cemetery." Sunan Abi Dawud 3960 reference 31 Hadith 35. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Imran b. Hussein said, "A man emancipated 6 slaves at the time of his death and he had no other property. The Prophet was informed about it. He cast lots among them, emancipated 2 and retained 4 in slavery." Sunan Abi Dawud 3961 reference 31 Hadith 36. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Abd Allah b. Umar reported the Messenger of Allah as saying, "If anyone emancipates a slave who has property, the property of the slave belongs to him except that the master makes a stipulation." Sunan Abi Dawud 3962 reference 31 Hadith 37. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Narrated Abu Hurairah. The Prophet said, "The child of adultery is worst of the 3. Abu Hurairah said, "That I give a flog in the path of Allah, as a charity, is dearer to me than emancipating a child of adultery." Sunan Abi Dawud 3963 reference 31 Hadith 38. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Narrated Wathila ibn al-Aska. Al-Larif ibn ad-Daylami said, "We went to Wathila ibn al-Aska and said to him, Tell us a tradition which has not addition or omission." He became angry and replied, "One of you recites when his copy of a Quran is hung up in his house, and he makes additions and omissions." We said, "All we mean is a tradition you have heard from the Messenger of Allah." He said, "We went to the Prophet about a friend of ours who deserved hell for murder. He said, 'Emancipate a slave on his behalf. Allah will set free from hell a member of the body for every member of his.'" Sunan Abi Dawud 3964 reference 31 Hadith 39. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves, narrated Abu Naji as Sulami. Along with the Messenger of Allah we besieged the palace of At-Taif. The narrator, Muda, said, "I heard my father, sometimes, say, Palace of At-Taif, and, sometimes, Fort of At-Taif, which are the same. I heard the Messenger of Allah say, he who causes an arrow to hit its mark in Allah's cause will have it counted as a degree for him, in paradise." He then transmitted the rest of the tradition. I heard the Messenger of Allah say, "If a Muslim man emancipates a Muslim man, Allah, the Exalted, will make every bone of his protection for every bone of his emancipator from hell. And if a Muslim woman emancipates a Muslim woman, Allah will make every bone of hers protection for every bone of her emancipator from hell on the day of resurrection." Sunan Abi Dawud 3965 reference 31 Hadith 40. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Amr ibn Abasa said that Mara ibn Kab said, "I heard the Messenger of Allah say, if anyone emancipates a Muslim slave, that will be his ransom from Jahannam." Sunan Abi Dawud 3966 reference 31 Hadith 41. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. The tradition mentioned above has also been transmitted by Mu'adh through a different chain of narrators. After mentioning the words "if any Muslim emancipates a Muslim slave," and "if a woman emancipates a Muslim woman," this version adds, "if a man emancipates 2 Muslim women, they will be deliverance from hellfire. 2 bones of there will be emancipation for each of his bone." Abu Dawud said, Salim did not hear traditions from Shurabil. Shurabil died at Sifan. Sunan Abi Dawud 3967 reference 31 Hadith 42. Sunan Abi Dawud, the Book of Manumission of Slaves. Narrated Abu Darda. The Prophet said, "The similitude of a man who emancipates a slave at the time of his death is like that of a man who gives a present after satisfying his appetite." Sunan Abi Dawud 3968 reference 31 Hadith 43.